Welcome in to Locked On Knicks, and the Knicks lost another ugly one, 120 to 105. Turns out the new year, not a new them, at least not based off the last two games. Gavin, what are we going to talk about after this latest ugly loss in our Julius Randle-less world right now?
We're going to get into RJ Barrett stringing together another pretty good game. Maybe some of it was in garbage time, but I thought he was pretty effective. We'll talk about Quinten Grimes' defense, Obi Toppin's statistical career night, and we'll get into some of your questions. So all that and more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. As always, we want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen every day. We're available on all your favorite platforms, including now YouTube. So if you wouldn't mind checking us out on YouTube, that is much appreciated because we're trying to build up a little presence on there. And you can see our beautiful smiling faces every day. Or in today's case, not as beautiful, maybe smiling some, but also frowning some faces. Anyway. I'm Alex Wolfe. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. Also figured I'd just wish everybody a happy new year since Gavin was so kind as to allow me to go hang out with a few friends over New Year's Eve and cover the pod there. And, of course, that means that I have to introduce Gavin Schall, who is your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster and the co-host of this show, along with myself. And we are talking about the Knicks 120 to 105 loss to the Raptors in Toronto, a fanless stadium. Once again, Toronto has decided to cut off fans for 30 days or 3 weeks, whatever it was. I don't know. I forget. In response to just the COVID cases increasing at the moment. And, they've decided to go empty arena again, which is a little weird. And this game was a little weird, too, I guess. The Knicks, it was like Tom Thibodeau's worst nightmare. Only had Taj Gibson as one of his regular centers available for this game. So his whole, 48 minutes of rim protection thing was not really an option. And on paper, this Raptors team plays pretty small. So you would think, good matchup. But in reality, Gavin, they're one of the, longest teams in the NBA. As far as the height might not be there, but these guys can block the crap out of guys left and right. They can contest shots like crazy. They play really hard, really consistent defense on this team. And, the Knicks sort of, I don't know if I want to call it the B squad, but they're certainly, COVID depleted team right now could not keep up with what the Raptors were throwing at them in this game.
Yeah, I thought it was a bad sign when OG Anunoby drove the ball to the basket twice on RJ Barrett and basically put him in the stanchion on both of them. Could not have been easier. Fred VanVleet was just raining fire from three. Scotty Barnes felt like he was too big. Pascal Siakam kept getting mismatches and felt like he was too big and long and could do whatever he wanted around the rim. This felt like, I've said it in reference to the Knicks before, not as often the last 2 years, but like an NBA team against a college team for stretches. And I thought the Knicks played well in the first half. It was sort of the inversion of the analogy that Wally made during the T-Wolves game of the scrappy mid-major going up against the Duke or the North Carolina. Quinten Grimes in particular was leading that charge, and he was doing a great job digging in and helping and forcing steals, and the Knicks were hitting just enough threes to sort of stick around in the second half. I just sort of think they got depleted and ran out of energy a little bit. But the place I want to start, even though Obi Toppin statistically had a career night, a career high 19 high points, or tied a career high with 19 high points, a career high 6 assists, I want to start with RJ Barrett because I thought it was an important development, Alex, that he had another good game. It didn't shoot well initially, and you can make an argument that a lot of his production came in garbage time. I already mentioned the poor defense, but I thought he showed a burst that he hasn't recently. Even that little pump and blow by of Pascal Siakam into the one-handed dunk on that play. All I was left thinking was, man, he outside of last game, he hasn't moved like that since the first couple games of the season. And then later in the game, taking advantage of mismatches twice on Fred VanVleet, backing him down for a layup one time, and then a reverse pivot banker lefty hook threw some really smart passes, had a cross-court bullet to Obi Toppin, who ended up missing the wide open three. A little toss back to Evan Fournier from under the basket for a 3-ball. Had that in rhythm step back 3 to beat the shot clock. Overall, it was just sort of everything I'm looking for from RJ. And to me, that's, I mean, we just did the episode with Tom, right, where we all lauded RJ as probably the single most important swing piece for the Knicks the rest of the season, the biggest story to watch. I think these last 2 games have been a big step in the right direction on that front.
Yeah, I agree. I liked how he played. I do think that, remember how, you used to always say, like, Ben Simmons is, and obviously we haven't seen Ben Simmons play this whole year, but Ben Simmons is sort of like RJ Barrett's nightmare because it's a guy that can guard him that's bigger, stronger, longer, and, can just generally not take any crap from RJ on the court. That's more or less the matchup that he ran into with OG Anunoby. And pretty much anybody on the Raptors can do that to him, other than maybe like Fred VanVleet. So I think that it was pretty impressive that he managed to, take really some lemons and make lemonade out of them in this one, because he was not looking good through the first quarter or two. It looked like he was very overmatched against like the likes of Anunoby and some of these guys, and then started kind of sort of figuring things out as the game went along. And getting that shooting percentage up, making a few shots here and there, made a step back 3 at one point, which is something that we obviously want to see out of him. Hopefully he starts finding his rhythm again soon. I do think, like you said, he's gone a long way towards maybe getting that rhythm back a bit over these last couple of games. I am still kind of left with many of the same questions about, is this a guy that, what's his ceiling? Like, is he going to end up looking more like the guy who could score 30 early in the season? Is he more the inconsistent guy that we saw for, 20 or so games after? Does he sort of live in this area where he was sort of like last year, but maybe slightly worse from a 3-point shooting perspective, where he's just going to be like a good role player? Maybe he should just sort of lean into like figuring out how to, play really good defense and make himself useful in as many ways as possible on offense, even if he's not scoring the ball. I don't know for sure, but yeah, it was definitely a good game from him. Also a great game from Obi Toppin, which you mentioned, so I'll throw it to him now. 19 points, 7 to 12 shooting, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 blocks and a steal, and to everyone's delight, 45 out of 48 minutes for Obi Toppin in this game. So I think that's probably a season high for any Knick player in regulation. So, you wanted more Obi minutes, you get more Obi minutes, I guess, in this game. And, I really liked what he was doing. He broke his career high in assists, I think, in the first quarter with 4 of them. And, they were using him a lot, having him pass out of situations going towards the hoop. And he was finding open shooters and things of that nature. And just in general, I think was doing a good job of doing all the things that we normally like from him, plus flashing the passing, which we always kind of talked about as a plus for him. Unfortunately, I do think that a lot of his best moments kind of came in garbage time too, because Tibbs was basically using him as a spot up shooter for a lot of the first few quarters too, which has always been sort of a weird thing with him because he does so much better when he's going towards the hoop. So I wish his usage would have been a little better. We might have seen Obi get his first 20 piece in this game if that was the case, but all in all, it was a really good game for him, and just the latest entry in the, like, can Obi keep that level of energy up for regular minutes? Yes, he can. He just did it for 45. So obviously he can keep that energy up.
Yeah. I guess, how would you ideally use Obi Toppin? Because to me, that's such an interesting issue with him, and maybe part of the conversation we were having when he was first drafted, because it is hard to, like, just park him around the basket when you have Nerlens Noel, you have Mitchell Robinson. I think he's best utilized like when he's able to be active off the ball, is able to cut with some momentum towards the rim. So I don't mind him being stanchioned out there on the perimeter. It's just sort of how active is he and how able are the Knicks to involve him. And to some extent, that's not even really about Obi, right? It's just about, like, how well is everyone else moving?
Yeah, I'm with you. I just think as far as Obi's concerned, I don't think that they were utilizing the cuts enough in this game, and, run a little pick and roll with him. Like, Taj Gibson is at least, since he was out there with Taj for a lot, for how many minutes total? 30 minutes of his 45. Use Taj a little bit in the corner, who's at least proven enough to keep a guy somewhat on him at this point. You know, run some pick and roll with Obi, try to get him involved that way. You know, try to get him on those cuts. And even if you have Mitchell Robinson out there and stuff, you know, he could still do the cutting there. And, you know, you can even give it to him, sort of try to get him going downhill, almost like how you used to with RJ, you know, where just try to get him the ball and get him, you know, streaking towards the hoop with a quick screen around the perimeter or something. Maybe it's with a Mitchell Robinson, you know, who can give him a handoff and then get him going downhill. You know, just anything you could do to get him at the rim a little more, because I still think that's his forte, even if he's getting a little better at shooting the three lately.
Yeah, I think it's all about getting momentum for him. But Alex, I'll throw it to you one final time. Let's talk a little Built Bar, and then I'll share my thoughts on Obi Toppin right after. But you know what? You gotta fuel up if you want to play 45 minutes like Obi Toppin.
I definitely have to do that, and you know, it's a new year, so it's a new you. You got New Year's resolutions, and if yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bars in your plan. That tastes like a candy bar, and maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easy to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky or waxy or taste like a chemical spill. You want to eat healthy, but it just gets so boring. By like week 3, you might be thinking, this is just not worth it. Where's the chocolate? That's where Built Bars come in. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, but they also only contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. You can compare that to a candy bar, which usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, dozens of net carbs, and of course, fat. You don't want any of that. You're trying to lose weight in the new year. So even if you're not a huge fan of working out, though, you can at least eat something that tastes good and is good for you. That way, when you enjoy a delicious Built Bar, you can almost count it as a workout. And there's so many flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, and many more. In fact, Built is always coming out with new limited time flavors. So check out Built.com often to see what's new. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, Gavin, I'll just right to you out of the break. What should we talk about? We did sort of do like almost a mini mailbag solicitation for this game because we didn't feel like talking about the actual game too much. So we have some questions from people from Twitter, but do you want to talk a little more about the game or hop into those?
Yeah, I wanted to share some final thoughts on Obi Toppin, because I thought his first quarter was maybe the best overall quarter or right up there that I've ever seen him play before. I mean, came out, hit the 3 ball right away. And then I just love, I mean, teams are so like crapping their pants basically every time he cuts to the rim or gets the ball around the rim. He's built up a reputation in the NBA at this point. And that's fantastic for a guy who we were questioning whether he'd even be in the league in a couple of years, a season ago. I mean, there was that throw in from Burks over the top where he caught it. And to your point, just leveraging the attention he got. That time kicked it to Taj Gibson for 3. Had another play where he cut to the basket. And on this play, he didn't even get an assist because it ended up being him throwing a pass to Fournier, who swung it around to IQ. IQ missed the 3. Obi flushed it back home. But the bigger thing to me was when he cut, multiple defenders on Toronto had to go with him. That gave Fournier a slight opening. Fournier made the pass, got an even bigger opening for Emmanuel quickly. Another play where, I mean, to your point, getting it to him on the move, caught it on the run, a baseline dribble drive past the defender, and then just this brilliant feed to Evan Fournier. And I love passers who can do this. He didn't throw the ball to Fournier. He threw the ball away from the defender, and Fournier went and got it. It's almost like the great quarterbacks in the NFL. You're putting in the spot. You're not sending it to a specific guy. Also hit an elbow jumper in the fourth quarter, which was nice to see. But I thought a really, really fantastic opening quarter for Obi Toppin, leveraging his cutting ability, leveraging his passing. The other guy I mentioned quickly, but I wanted to talk about was Quinten Grimes, just because I just think it's so obvious that this is going to be a guy who he just seems like a player who will be on a contender for the prime of his career and will be, whether as a starter or as a 6th or 7th man, will be an integral piece of that contender. I've seen people throw out the Danny Green comparison before. I'm starting to like it more and more, especially defensively, just because he still needs to get stronger. He still needs to get a little bit more mobile on that end. But the guy is just so smart and so ahead of his years in terms of, I mean, Wally kept mentioning this in terms of how he helped, and he bailed the Knicks out of multiple possessions where they were in a mismatch, and he was able to come over, help, recover, and stay in a good spot. He reminded me of a lot of the guys on the Raptors who just kill you defensively with their intelligence. So I just, beyond the fantastic shooting, I just continue to be really, really excited about Quinten Grimes. I think whenever this Knicks team is good, he's going to be a really important piece on it.
Yeah, I agree. I love Grimes too. I thought that he had a great game. I think his help defense, Mike Breen was lauding it all day. And that really stood out to me. I mean, when he was out there, I felt like were some of the only times that the Knicks really felt credible on defense a lot of times in this game. They had such a hard time otherwise, with a lot of different groupings out there. It's just sort of one of those games where there was no players that did well, in like the plus minus department, but Grimes only coming in with a -6, which put him sort of in similar company with like Alec Burks, who had a -5, and played pretty well. I think that sort of was pretty telling as far as to his impact. When he was out there, it felt like the Knicks were kind of in the game. When he was out of the game, it seemed like they were struggling to defend all that well, and especially to like generate events. Like he and Alec Burks both did a really good job of like keeping on their toes, trying to anticipate passes. They both generated a number of steals on their own. Grimes ended up with 4, Burks ended up with 5. So not an insignificant number between them at all. That's 9 total steals between them out of 11 total for the team. They had an outsized impact on the defensive end, which was really good to see. I really do think, Grimes also managed to put the ball on the floor once or twice, drive by a defender. He's proving that he's more than just a jump shooter, but even if ultimately some of the other stuff doesn't pan out and he does end up as just a jump shooter, we can feel pretty damn good about it because he's clearly the real deal on that end.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. He is going to be a two-way stud for the New York Knicks for a very long time. All right, let's quickly get into our first mailbag question, then we'll take a break and we'll hit one more. But the first one comes from Doug B at Doug Lust. Fantastic username. Compare and contrast Knicks/Raptors draft and development process and see which projects better. So I thought that was a fun question. Obviously relevant. The Raptors have been widely considered one of the best in the NBA in that capacity. Pascal Siakam, a late first-round pick, a massive success story. OG Anunoby in the same boat. Scotty Barnes, a surprising pick for a lot of people over Jalen Suggs. So far, that has looked like the right decision. Fred VanVleet, a second-round pick, one of the best, maybe in NBA
history. I think undrafted, technically speaking.
Oh, was he?
Actually.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I forgot about that. One of the better undrafted free agents in NBA history in that case. Chris Boucher, I'm fairly sure was undrafted out of Oregon. He's a success story, becoming a rotation player for them. You can go on and on and on and on. The point is they have done it better than just about anyone else. And I think the Knicks, with their new front office, may be on a similar trajectory, Alex. Obviously, they don't have anyone with the star projection of a VanVleet or Barnes, but in terms of these last two drafts and getting value, it feels sort of similar in terms of finding diamonds in the rough that maybe fit in with the culture and the system in place of a specific team.
Yeah, I mean, so like last year, for example, obviously they find Obi Toppin. A lot of people kind of scoffed at that pick, us included. I mean, I'm not going to absolve us. Like we were like, well, this sucks, on draft night, and we're like, damn it, like nobody can save the Knicks from themselves. They end up with Obi Toppin. This is going to be terrible. But clearly they saw something that a lot of people didn't, and I guess you could still argue like Tyrese Halliburton, for example, like, oh, they missed on him. That sucks, but most of the other guys that we were kind of looking at in that spot as amateur draft pundits here didn't work out nearly as good as Obi Toppin. And they found probably the best, one of the 2 or 3 best players available reasonably in their range, because Halliburton could have reasonably gone in that spot. So if you want to say Halliburton's better than Obi, sure, it was a miss, but Obi's playing fantastic now. And it's really hard to argue with that pick at this point. Same thing as the Quickly pick, we sort of scoffed at that. And he's worked out as well as he has. And he has, I mean, again, maybe not quite the star projection that Fred VanVleet does at this moment, but Fred VanVleet didn't have that projection either when he first started in the league and then sort of figured it out and got there. There is a world, and we've talked about it a number of times, where Quickly could end up a legitimate star if things really start falling into place for him. And then, Grimes would just sung his praises. He looks like a fantastic value at 25. Deuce McBride, he didn't get a ton of playing time in this game. I thought he maybe got hurt or something, but Deuce looks like a really dogged defender. Like he can shoot the three, although he didn't hit many in this game, but he could definitely distribute the ball. He can do point guard things. And Jericho Sims, they picked damn near the end of the draft, and he looks fantastic as well. On top of, if you want to throw one more guy out there that we haven't seen in the NBA yet, they managed to pick up Lukas Samanic, who used to be with the Spurs as like a second draft candidate, and he's looking pretty good too. I think that might have been the case with Boucher for the Raptors. I feel like he maybe at least was on a summer league team for some other team, something like that for the Raptors. I might be mistaken, but maybe we could call that the Knicks version of Boucher. But either way, yeah, I like what they're doing in the draft right now. The development thing is another story entirely, and we won't be able to really grade them on that for, I think, another 2 or 3 years, based off the fact that like RJ wasn't their pick, even if we still believe in RJ greatly. They pretty much, they only have guys that are in their second year right now, and most guys you can't really start grading like that until they're about at the end of their rookie contract, because then it's like time to pay them. And then you really figure out, like, okay, how good was this development staff? Like, how much this player going to get paid? What's the projection looking like for once he's not a rookie anymore, or on a rookie scale contract? And that's sort of where the cream rises to the top. So a couple of years, but as of right now, I think the process is good.
Yeah, I'll put in a word for the Knicks development so far. IQ, you need the three to come around at some point, but he's a vastly improved player in just about every other capacity, certainly defensively. We've talked again and again, the ability to get all the way to the rim versus just to floater range. His mid-range game, which was non-existent a year ago, all of a sudden he's like a pretty nasty turnaround jumper from the foul line in his bag. Obi Toppin, a completely different guy. I mean, beyond being just the plus-minus king of the Knicks, just in terms of skill set, the ability to face up and drive. We're seeing a burgeoning like face-up based post-game for him. Defensively, he continues to make positive strides. Even someone like Quinten Grimes, like he was not this guy at the University of Houston a year ago, or maybe just translating to the NBA a little bit better. But it feels like the Knicks have put in work there as well. So I'm pretty confident in the Knicks in that capacity. I think, just to answer Doug's question overall, it's not really fair to compare the Knicks to Toronto 2 years in, because Toronto, again, is pretty much the class of the NBA in these capacities, and they just have success story after success story, and really high-level ones with all-stars. I don't think Van Vliet's ever made an all-star team, but there's a decent chance he will this year, and Siakam being an all-star, and all these other guys. But the Knicks could be in the upper echelon of the NBA eventually. All right, let's see what else we got. Steve Thomas at Dark Steve 590. At what point do the Knicks start trading off quote unquote assets in order to assess the rest of the roster? Alex, I will throw that to you.
Tomorrow. I'm pretty much there. I'm, and we'll talk about this in a minute. And I you said you touched on this a little bit the other day, on the solo pod, but like, I don't think that necessarily means trading Julius Randle. I do think that Julius Randle needs to play better if the Knicks are going to ever get anywhere, particularly this season. I mean, obviously, we've seen these last 2 games. It's a struggle without him there, but they've also been relying on Kemba Walker a good deal recently. They don't have Derrick Rose. It's not all just thanks to Julius Randle being out that they're not playing well, but they're also, they're just not hitting shots and things of that nature. They're definitely not quite used to, the attention, not having the attention on Julius Randle as much as it normally is, which is hurting them some. But, so I wouldn't put Julius in there, but if we're talking like Alec Burks, I would trade him tomorrow if the right offer came up. If we're talking Evan Fournier, I would trade him tomorrow. Or I should say, like, as soon as guys get back from COVID protocols and Kemba gets back from his, tweaked ankle right now. But, once you get some semblance of health back on the team, I would trade Burks tomorrow. I would trade Fournier tomorrow easily. I would trade Taj Gibson or Nerlens Noel if some team thought that they would be helpful to them. Probably not both, but one or the other for sure. Maybe both, I guess, if you feel confident that Mitch and Jericho Sims can carry you in that capacity the rest of the year and you want to play small a little more and get Obi out there. But Yeah, I would look into doing those. Kemba Walker too. I mean, as much as I've liked his resurgence lately, if some team comes to you like I'm trying to think. I honestly, as far as the league at large is concerned, it's so hard to keep track of like who needs what right now because everybody's just kind of screwed with this whole injury situation. I think records are getting a little screwed up in that regard. As far as like what the standings are now might not be reflective of how they're going to look at the end of the year when everybody's healthy and everybody gets that final few week push to like really go after it. But, maybe like the Clippers or something would be into Kemba, or the Mavericks, as much as that's kind of sacrilege, or, some team like that, find a team that would be into him and wants to give you something of value for him, thanks to that nice little 44-point game and the Christmas triple-double and all that stuff, then trade him tomorrow too. I mean, at this point, we've seen basically with all of the quote-unquote best players on the team, the Knicks aren't, the starters are bad. They're just straight up bad, and they get run off the floor a lot of nights. And then we've seen, in these last two games that clearly the younger players need some seasoning and some time to, get better before they're ready to like lead the team, and really be like huge impact players without the assistance of some of those vets. So I think if you can keep like the main engine in Julius Randle and then trade off some of these other vets and get some assets to build out more young assets on this team, that's what I would do. I think that's the way to be. And so I would start the fire sale tomorrow if someone was interested.
Yeah, to be clear, I kind of don't think the Knicks are going to do it at all. That just doesn't really seem like their MO. Their MO this season seems to be winning.
Oh, I don't think they will either. Yeah. Thinking they're going to do it versus like wanting them to do it, totally different. I agree with you. I think they're going to ride it out.
Yeah. But anyways, my point was going to be, if they do it, I think they would do it to try and get a first round pick. And with Derrick Rose injured and probably, I don't think likely to be traded anyways, Alec Burks is probably the one guy who could get you a first round pick with how well he's playing, depending on the team. So I threw together a little list, Alex. You could cut in at any point and stop me if you like a team or you don't think a team is realistic. But I just went through the whole league and just wrote down a bunch of names. The Bucks, I think he'd be a great fit on. I don't think they can trade a first because I think New Orleans owns all their firsts for the indefinite future. Maybe wrong about that. The Heat, on paper, I feel like Burks would be a great Heat culture guy, but they have Victor Oladipo coming back who probably fill that role. Obviously, Tyler Hero. They have Max Strus, who's been shooting the ball well, so maybe not the best fit. The Cavs, I think, and I'll throw it to you for this one, I think they're an interesting option with Colin Sexton and Ricky Rubio both out for the season. It feels like a combo guard, and we know Burks can play some point. In a pinch would be a really great fit for them. And I like the combination of his shooting and his defense and his handling ability next to Garland with those two bigs. I just think he'd be fun on that team. But to me, it's just a question of, does Cleveland want to say, all right, we have all these injuries, let's pair back and kind of put things together for next year. Obviously, if they were to trade a first to the Knicks, I think it would have to be heavily protected because you're not giving up a mid-first round pick for Alec Burks.
Yeah, so I think like the Bucks and the Heat, obviously, yeah, I could see that happening. They're obviously really talented teams that have big aspirations this year. So, of course, they would go for them. They have even a first-round pick that would really entice the Knicks that much. Maybe. I mean, I guess, really the Knicks have turned the 25th pick 2 years in a row into a pretty solid contributor. So, I guess that in theory, yeah, that they'd probably be interested in that sort of thing. Cleveland, though, is interesting. I mean, I think that really they would – so they're currently at the 5 seed. They're 21-16. They've weathered the whole, COVID storm pretty well to this point. Like, they're 6-4 in their last 10. If they feel like they can – keep this going and really be a top 5 seed legitimately, or maybe even do like what the Knicks did, go on a little run and, steal that 4 seed away or something. Maybe it's something that they're into. I think that they could somewhat confidently say at this point, like, okay, I think we're definitely going to make the playoffs. So maybe they just lottery protect it, or maybe do the Dallas thing and like top 10 protect it to send it to the Knicks. So if they would do that, I think as the Knicks, I would probably take that because, I think that feels about right. If you get a pick off of a team that, let's say that Cleveland even, ends up the 6th seed or something, like let's say Philly makes the Ben Simmons trade, whatever it's going to be, whoever they get sort of gives them a shot in the arm, and Philly leapfrogs Cleveland back into the the top 5, and Cleveland ends up the 6th seed. Even if that's the case, that's good for Cleveland because they hold on as a team that doesn't have to go into the play-in, and I think that's still pretty good for the Knicks because the 6th seed, that means that you're probably like around the 18th pick, something like that. 18th ish, 17th maybe, something like that. So I mean that's a good pick. That's a dangerous place to place the New York Knicks with their draft record now. They could potentially trade back 3 times, net, another first round pick or a couple more second round picks or something, and also end up with a great player at like pick 24, 25 again, and knock it out of the park like they have these past 2 drafts. So I like that for the Knicks. I like giving them more opportunities to wheel and deal, let Brock Aller and Leon Rose shine. So I would definitely be down for that. The main thing is, would Cleveland be down for it? And I think that the answer to that question lies with, do they feel like in their heart of hearts, their hearts of hearts, I should say, that their team is legit? And I think things are looking up for them. So I would feel like things were legit if I was them. But maybe they're still a little too gun shy considering their shaky past. So I could see it. I could also not see it. You know what I mean? It's kind of a wishy-washy answer, but if that was on the table and the Knicks had it and they wanted to put, say, like a top 10 protection, I'd be totally down, as a Knicks fan for that one.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, I went through the whole Western Conference, and the one team that stood out is the team that Alec Burks spent the majority of his career with, the Utah Jazz. I think could clearly use another wing. Joe Ingles has lost a little bit of a step there. In general, has really struggled defensively in the playoffs, as has Bojan Bogdanovic. So you could use maybe Bogdanovic has been incredible offensively this year, but just for specific matchups, I think they could use more of a 2-way wing. Burks is obviously comfortable playing in Utah. I think he got at least a couple of years under Quinn Snyder. Maybe not the cleanest fit with Donovan Mitchell, but I think the beauty of Burks is his skill set is so diverse and he's such an accommodating player that he can kind of fit in anywhere, anytime. I think in Utah's dream world, they're getting a bigger wing, maybe someone more like a Harrison Barnes who can really defend the LeBrons and the Lucas, because that's ultimately what's killed Utah the last few years, right? Like the inability to stop the big alpha wings on the other best teams in the Western Conference. But Burks is a solid defensive player, and offensively, I think he makes all the sense in the world for a team that's already putting together one of the best offensive seasons in NBA history. So to me, that along with Cleveland are maybe the 2 crown jewels of potential Burks trades.
Yeah, the only problem with that one is, having looked it up here, they have their 2022 first round pick already going out to Memphis. And that's probably going out. It's lightly protected selections 1 to 6 this year, which I think we can already rule out that conveying this year. So it's conveying this year. Then they have their 2024 pick going to Oklahoma City, and that's protected 1, 2, 3 years in a row. So that's going to be 2024, 25, and 26. So unfortunately, they would have to lift their protections on it or renegotiate with Oklahoma City to be able to give that pick up, or to give up their 26, I should say, because otherwise it's tied up in those future protections. So maybe they can, grease the wheels a little bit. They have a few extra second round picks laying around. So maybe they just say, hey, OKC, can we give you, an extra second round pick in exchange for the protections lifting on this a year earlier, and then we'll convey our second round picks or whatever. Maybe they do something like that. But, so it would be good. It's just if the Knicks trade with Utah, they should probably anticipate things lasting a little longer, unless Utah can reroute a player somewhere else and then get the first round pick to go to the Knicks in that way. But otherwise, I like it. I like the fit. I think pretty much any team can use an Alec Burks, if we're being completely honest. Even if the fit isn't perfect with Donovan Mitchell, like he's proved this year, he can hit spot up shots. He can, he can defend his butt off and really affect things on the defensive end. He can, pass some. He's the guard. That experiment failed, but he can move the ball. He's a willing ball mover. He doesn't let it stick to him unless he needs to, and he has a pretty good judgment in his brain for like okay, time to take over versus, all right, time to kind of distribute and let others take over. So I like his fit there. He plays, quite frankly, just like championship caliber finishing piece type of basketball, and the Jazz are a championship contender and could probably use a finishing piece like that. So I definitely like the fit there. I'm sure David Locke would like it as well.
Yeah, big fan. All right, we're going to try and get to one more mailbag question, but I'm looking at the time, so let's save it for our next pod, and maybe a full mailbag, Alex, sometime later this week. But on that note, we will wrap up this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. We really appreciate all of you tuning in, and yeah, we'll be back soon. So until then, be good, peace out, and enjoy 2022.